Okay, so we have been learning about the three components of color as a way for us to begin learning how to paint. Yesterday we covered hue, which is the color and how to change color. We then painted a color wheel together as a way to demonstrate that we understood that mixing more than one color together creates a new color or a new hue. And we did that with the dual primaries that we have included in our palette. So we use the cool blue and the cool red to make our purple family, our warm blue and our cool yellow to make our green family, and our warm yellow and our warm red to make our orange family. So hopefully you've had a chance to finish your color wheel. Today we are going to talk about the next component of color, which is value. So value is the lightness or darkness of a color itself. We use value in a painting to show highlights and shadows to create the three-dimensional effect on objects to make them look as realistic as possible. The way we change a color's value is by adding white or by adding black. When we add white to a color, what happens is that color gradually gets lighter, creating what we call a tint of that color. When we add black to a color, we make that color darker, making what we call a shade of that color. Now we're working in watercolor right now, and if you look at your palette, you'll notice that you don't have white watercolor. There is actually not really such a thing as white watercolor. Sometimes watercolor sets have white paint included in them, and that is typically something we call gouache, which is an opaque version of watercolor paint. And traditionally, watercolor is done without white. What we will do to create a lighter version of a color in watercolor is add water, because more water and less paint creates a lighter and lighter color. So I am going to grab my sketchbook paper. I could go ahead and paint right on the inside of the sheet from the color wheel, or I could paint along this back side of the sheet from the color wheel. Whatever you choose is fine. So I'm going to grab one of those sheets. I am then going to take my pencil and I'm going to make a group of 11 shapes in a line. It doesn't matter to me what those shapes are, but I do need 11 of them. So whatever you decide to do is fine. And just like yesterday when we did the shapes for our color wheel, I am skipping a space so that I can paint right from one shape to the next. I'm just gonna double check before I start that I have 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now for a value scale, what I'm going to do is start painting here in the center. I'm going to add water. To make my color lighter or to create a tint, and I'm going to add black to create a darker color or a shade. Okay, you may use any color in your palette. The one color that will be very challenging to use will be this light, the coolest yellow. The reason for this is it's already a very, very light color and it doesn't lighten up well. And also when you add black to it, it turns a really hideous kind of pea green sort of color. So I don't recommend that you use that yellow. You could use any of the rest of the paints. And we will use the black. So the black is down here at the end of my palette. I'm going to put a drip of water on my black paint. And then I'm going to choose a color to paint with. To choose this cool red. So I'm going to put water on there, and then just like yesterday, I'm going to go ahead and kind of stir some water in, and I'm going to move it out here onto my palette. Kind of incorporated that little bit that was there from yesterday. I am then going to go ahead and paint this color right here in the center, which is where we start for a value scale. Now what I'm going to do is clean my paintbrush out, and I'm just going to add a drip of water into that puddle. And hopefully when that dries, that's just a little bit lighter than the first version. I'm going to clean my paintbrush out again and add more of that water in. Now this side of the color wheel, or this side of the value scale, sorry, one, it's tricky because we're starting to add more and more water, so it can be easy to bump your colors into each other. And then two, you won't really know if you have been successful until they dry, because there's a little bit of color shift with watercolor. I am now going to, like, that's seeming like it's going to be very close to the same color, just going to try to rinse out most of my paint and not go back to the pile. And now I'm going to do that again. Maybe grab just the tiniest bit of color. So just barely, barely, barely. A little bit of, this is practically just paint water on that last one. So you can see I have pretty big puddles of paint. If I want, I can squeeze my paintbrush dry and go ahead and just kind of suck some of that up. So that it doesn't leave those strange marks. I can also kind of monitor and push some of that around as it dries a little bit. But that is, those then are my 5 lighter values. I'm going to do the same process now with the black. This puddle, I can keep using it. It's just going to need more paint. It's mostly water at this point. So I am grabbing some more pink or red off this pile and adding it in. I'm going to clean my paintbrush off. Now black is incredibly strong, so I don't want a lot of black. I'm just going to add the tiniest little bit of black to start with. Might have been too much black actually already. So you can see that I adjust right away by cleaning my paintbrush off and adding a little bit more of the paint, the pink, the red. I feel like that could be too black. We'll see. I'm gonna try to stir in the rest of this. See if we get a little different color or if it looks like the same. I think that looks exactly the same. So we're gonna go ahead and add in a little bit additional black. If you find that it gets too dark too fast, you do have to just kind of adjust. We talked yesterday about, like there, that drip is gonna be way too dark. So I'm gonna kind of mix this in on my paper. If you feel like you made a mistake right away, you can take a paper towel and push down and just pull that color up. You can see there, it's just 100% black at this point. So I'm gonna go ahead and try. So you'll notice how the color changes as we add the black too, like it's getting a little more purple. And that is normal. There's a lot of blue in black pigment, and so that's why black makes the yellow kind of an icky sort of green color. And then you'll also notice that as your colors get darker, it's harder to kind of see the darkerness, the color that they are. trying to keep this with some hint of the red and not just entirely black. But because the color is so deeply pigmented, it's hard to kind of see what color I'm making. And one more little bit of black. You need to make at least one of these in your sketchbook or on your sheet. And when you are finished with it, you're gonna go ahead and take a photo and upload it to Google Classroom. As I let this dry, I may have to adjust those colors, okay? So I am gonna let this dry and see if I have to adjust anything, if I have to add any red or add any water, just to kind of make sure that my values get gradually lighter and gradually darker. So for instance, I think this one could be more red. So I'm gonna suck up some more of that paint and just kind of add a little bit more of the red over the top, just so that they're a little bit more different from each other, but still gradually getting darker. You can go ahead and practice that with more than one color if you like, but you do have to turn in one value scale.